airport facing Typhoon Zangsane. Wrong runway takeoff. And disaster struck. The origin of a deadly deviation. On the night of October 31st, 2000, the sky west of Taipei was choked by strong winds and lashing rain from Typhoon Zangsane. Against this gloomy backdrop, Singapore Airlines Flight 006 prepared to depart Chiang Kai-shek Airport for a connecting flight to Los Angeles. This was supposed to be a routine commercial journey, but things began to skew as the weather pushed the airport into near-zero visibility. Visibility was dragged down so low that the pilots had to rely on dim lights on the runway surface. Lights that were usually familiar, but that night easily deceived even the most seasoned aviators. At that time, the airport was repairing one of its two parallel runways. Runway 05R was closed and littered with construction equipment, but the storm obscured all warning signs, which were not clearly visible to begin with. The pilots were cleared to take off from 05L, but in the rain thick as a steel curtain, the two runways became hard to distinguish. As the aircraft moved to the holding point, the small distance between the two parallel paths, insignificant in normal conditions, became a silent trap. The flight crew believed they were aligned with 05L. In reality, they were standing on 05R, the path left empty for repairs. None of them intentionally chose wrong. This was the type of confusion that extreme weather, faint signals, and schedule pressure could coordinate to create. That night, the safety system that relied on human eyes lost its greatest advantage: clarity. The most obvious thing was that the chain of errors began not at the moment of acceleration, but at the intersection between man and environment. When the airport was submerged in the storm, every layer of protection became more fragile than usual, and just one step in the wrong position was enough to turn the whole story in a direction of no return. When the 747 entered the storm's blind zone, the Boeing 747-412, registered as 9V-SPK, was one of the largest and most stable aircraft models of that time. But on the night of October 31st, 2000, even a steel elephant like this was pushed into a disadvantage when Typhoon Zangsane covered the Taipei area. From the control tower to the cockpit, everyone knew they were working in non-ideal conditions, but the reality on the ground was harsher than any weather report could describe. Rain pounded the concrete like thousands of small stones, and crosswinds stretched every light on the runway into blurry streaks, making it hard to clearly define the main edge or the lane markings. A 747 relies heavily on ground visibility during the taxiing phase. That night, the cockpit saw only a pitch-black space in front of them, cut by a few uncertain strips of light. It wasn't a matter of skill, but a human limit when reading a map with the naked eye while that map was being torn to shreds by the weather. The aircraft advanced toward the takeoff direction, but things that seemed familiar, signs, markings, runway boundaries, seemed dissolved under the thick layer of rain. When a large aircraft moves in such a blind zone, every small detail of the airport must be clear enough to require no guessing. But here, the ground could not provide that certainty. The runway under repair was not completely shielded by signals easy to recognize in bad conditions. And when both the environment and support tools became blurred, the 747, no matter how powerful, still had to rely on visual perception, which was being stifled by the weather. The aircraft wasn't wrong. The humans weren't reckless. The environment itself dropped the necessary clues for everyone to know where they were. When this happens, even a 747 can step onto a path it should never take. Error in a place that required absolute precision. As the 747-412 slowly left the parking area and entered the taxiway system, everything seemed to be on the right track. The crew was cleared to take off from runway 05L, a legitimate, clear, and active path. But in that stormy night, the line between right and wrong was as thin as a stripe erased by rainwater. And exactly when the airport needed clarity the most, it provided too little. The crux lay in the two parallel runways, 05L and 05R. Normally, they are very easy to distinguish. But that night, visibility was down to a few hundred meters, signs were hidden behind the rain, and landmarks on the ground, things humans usually rely on, were distorted by wind and darkness. The crew believed they were following the path to 05L. In reality, they were gradually being pulled toward 05R, which was closed for repairs. Runway 05R had barriers and warning lights, but those signals were not designed for major storm conditions. Some lights were blown askew by the wind, others obscured by rain, leaving the entire area submerged in shadow. There were no advanced warning systems like today, lacking things that could tell the pilots directly, "You are in the wrong place." When ground signals aren't strong enough, humans are forced to rely on judgment. And judgment, under extreme weather pressure, is easily deceived by small factors that normally go unnoticed. The 747 moved forward, aligning with 05R without anyone in the cockpit or even the control tower, realizing that the mistake was growing with every meter. Where was the error? Not with any single individual, but in the fact that the whole system allowed a gray area to occur right where absolute precision was required. And when that gray area appears right as the weather attacks every sense, a wrong path is easily mistaken for the right one. Collision with things that should never appear before an aircraft. As the 747 to 412 accelerated, it did exactly what a large aircraft must do: push the entire massive steel block forward, waiting for enough speed to leave the ground. But the ground beneath it was not a path designed to support a flight, but a closed runway, piled with repair equipment, objects that were stationary but heavy enough to stop anything crashing into them. From the cockpit, the rain turned everything ahead into an opaque blur. As the plane accelerated, the 30 to 40 seconds of the takeoff roll passed in a flash. In those moments, the distance between the nose gear and the obstacle shortened without anyone realizing it. The pilots believed the ground before them was clear, and the numbers on the airspeed indicator were the only thing they needed to focus on. But then the 747 hit the point of no return. Having reached a speed nearly sufficient for takeoff, there was no room left to stop safely, and right at that moment, the dark silhouettes of the repair equipment appeared. Too late, too close. The excavators stood still like massive boulders right in the running path. With immense thrust increasing, the aircraft slammed into them in an unavoidable collision. The first impact caused the fuselage to split horizontally, like a piece of metal pulled off its trajectory. The right wing was violently jerked by an obstacle, causing fuel and fire to erupt instantly. The midsection was twisted as the front and rear slid in different directions. It all happened in a few short seconds, and the aircraft designed to fly at 10,000 meters was torn apart right on the ground. Looking back, this was not a moment of a single mistake, but the endpoint of a chain of deviations extending from the moment the plane took the wrong path. And when a 747 slams into fixed objects at takeoff speed, all consequences become irreversible. The final consequence of a chain of deviations. After the collision, the 747 was no longer a unified entity. Sections of the fuselage were pulled in many directions, fire erupted from the right wing, and the structure designed to protect humans at cruising altitude was now put to the most brutal test right on the ground. As the impact force traveled along the fuselage, it created areas that took a harder hit than others, and that led to a distinct difference between those who had a chance to escape and those who could not. Out of 179 people on board, 83 people did not survive the massive blow from the series of fixed obstacles. This was not a number resulting from a single moment, but the combined result of seating position, direction of impact, and the degree of deformation of each fuselage section. The front section was torn open, causing many there to suffer the strongest force. The center and rear areas, though also heavily impacted, retained enough structure to create natural pockets of safety, where 96 lucky people found a way out. Rescue forces arrived just minutes after the incident, but at such a level of damage, time was not the only deciding factor. In situations like this, survival often depends on the distance between each person and the point of first impact, just like how the strongest wave always hits a specific point on a boat. Looking back at the whole event, the loss of life is not just a number. It clearly reflects the severity of mistaking the runway from the start. A small deviation in harsh weather conditions led to cascading consequences, and when a large aircraft hits fixed objects at high speed, no safety system can guarantee integrity for everyone. The cold truth is just that, when a chain of errors is not stopped in time, the final part is always the humans who have to bear it. when a small deviation is enough to pull a whole flight off safe course. The subsequent investigation revealed what many in the industry call a silent deviation, a small error appearing right when bad weather and time pressure converged. The crew taxied along a route they believed was correct, but that belief was not rechecked by the most basic steps: verifying signs, confirming turn directions, and ensuring the aircraft was on the correct path to the permitted runway. When the rain covered the signs and the guide lights were dim as if submerged in fog, everything became easier to confuse. In aviation, failing to cross-check is like skipping the final lock on a safety door. There was nothing unusual or complex here. Just a momentary lapse, plus unfavorable weather context, was enough to pull the whole system off track. That night, the confusion went undetected by anyone, and the 747 proceeded onto a taxiway the crew thought was the runway. When they increased thrust, everything happened too fast for anyone to correct. This chain of confusion did not come from faulty equipment or any complex technical issue. It stemmed from something any human can fall into: believing they are right while missing a final check step. The brutal truth of this industry is that just a small deviation when the ground is wet with rain, and a giant aircraft can rush into a place it is not allowed to go. And when that happens, the consequences are usually not measured in broken steel, but in numbers no one wants to read aloud. That is why the aviation industry always reiterates: never ignore small signals, because often they are the boundary between a safe flight and a story retold in an investigation room. A cold milestone the whole industry was forced to review. For those in aviation long enough, this incident is not just a line of data in a file. It marked the first time, and until then the only time, Singapore Airlines had to face an incident with heavy casualties. This was also the first incident involving the Boeing 747-400, a symbol of technical power at the time. When an airline viewed as a safety standard had to enter the biggest investigation in its history, it sent a signal the whole industry could not ignore. No system is immune to error. The incident immediately became a mandatory lesson in training classes, not because it was complex, but because it was so ordinary. A mistake in bad weather, a wrong turn, a few missed cross-check steps, all created a chain of effects strong enough to knock a massive aircraft off its safe trajectory. The aviation industry understood clearly that if an airline with high standards like Singapore Airlines could still face problems, then every other airline had to be even more vigilant. The message from this incident remains valid today. Safety does not come from expensive technology, but from human discipline in every small step. Every guide light, every sign, every confirmation exists for a clear reason. When a small link is skipped on a rainy night, the system, no matter how powerful, can be pulled down. This accident became a cold but necessary reminder. In aviation, reputation does not protect you from mistakes. Only standard procedures, attention to detail, and a spirit of never underestimating small signals can keep the skies safe for everyone.